very little to do with what's happening. It has everything to do with the fact that it is trailing in the polling to Donald Trump's approval rating, as is the operation in Venezuela. The operation in Venezuela is 30 points more popular in Venezuela than in the United States.
So wait, so what are you suggesting?
I'm saying that Donald Trump, and he's
you think this is a Trump thing? It's because Trump is so unpopular?
I think that if there was capitulation from day one and Trump was getting a parade down the Grand Boulevard in Tehran, he would still be sitting at the similar approval rating because of
Don't you think Americans are rational about paying $1 more
I've seen
per
very little
gallon of gas? I mean, that seems actually quite rational. I mean, I don't share your skepticism of the American people. I think they understand, but they don't think that this. I think they are saying very clearly they do not think that this step needed to be taken, and that's actually Trump's own fault because he told them a year ago that he had already done the job. He had already neutralized the nuclear program. So then for him to come back and say, well, we need to wage a war, that seems like a bait and switch. I think Americans are rationally saying, what on earth is that about?
Well, over in Europe, you heard Christine Lagarde already say last week, you're going to see the reverberations of this war. Everybody watches that oil number. It's not just that number to watch. I was just after the speech talking to somebody who's very brilliant on financial markets. And they said to me, Rena, you're going to see the shocks continue from fertilizer to Africa to Asia to Europe. And Europe understands that, but they also did hear Trump loud and clear. They've already made moves on defense. They're creating their own defense ecosystem because Trump has made it clear that they don't know that they can rely on him at this point.
And they're doing what he wanted, which was getting close to that 5% of GDP for defense
But
spending.
this war has serious repercussions. That just the price of oil is not the only indicator for us to know. Not the
One of the major repercussions of this war is it's turned not only into an energy crisis, it's turned into a transatlantic crisis that's threatening the future of NATO, which was already very much in doubt after Trump threatened to annex Greenland. And that really caused massive shock in Europe and loss of faith in the United States. And now that loss of faith is increasing because Trump did not consult the Europeans before going into Iran, but now he's browbeating and threatening the Europeans to say, you have to come in and take care of our mess. And they're saying, this is not our war. This is not what NATO was all about, because NATO is about self-defense, and it's about collective defense in the territory of the NATO countries is attacked. But it was an attack. This is Trump going out and starting another war and trying to drag the Europeans in. And so and now Trump is starting to pull out of NATO if the Europeans don't come in and help them out. So this is causing a major crisis within the most successful alliance in military history. That's very, very alarming. And the only beneficiary is going to be Vladimir Putin. And by the way, Trump has nothing to say about the fact that Putin is helping Iran to target America.
And when Trump says NATO is a paper tiger, Putin's like, music to my ears. He loves to
Sure, they're not a paper tiger.
Can I just point out, there's a fact that I learned the other day that I think is very interesting. When NATO was being negotiated in about 1948, the United States, specifically us, we asked for a new clause, Article 6. That limited the geography of the defense. So the geography of NATO's defense is limited to Europe and the United States. So this is not even a task that, number one, is in NATO. Number two, as you said, is a defensive alliance. Also, I just want to read off, I think it's worth reading off some of the quotes we've gotten from Trump. In January of 2026, he said, it may be a choice between preserving NATO or seizing Greenland. He refused to rule out the use of military force. He also actually threatened to impose a 25% import tax on all of the European Union if they didn't just give us Greenland.
Why was he concerned about Greenland? He was concerned because he was unsure whether or not the Europeans could be relied upon in a difficult moment where they were putting the squeeze to.
When is the only time Article 5 has been invoked?
Yes, it was post 9/11.
And who are they helping? Us.
And
so they are
you're talking about the geographic constraints. You know what is within the geographic constraint is Ukraine. We bore a lot of that heavy lifting. We're working with NATO.
Hang on a second. So are you suggesting that Trump was threatening to attack Greenland because he was worried that the United States or that Europe wasn't going to hold up its end of the NATO bargain? I'm not sure I'm following that argument.
Let's blow up NATO to save it.
No, the argument for why we needed to expand our facilities in Greenland was that the Danes were unwilling to expand under the current terms.
That is actually totally not.
2004,
That is not.
amendment
No.
to
That
the
is.
original defense
I'm
agreement.
sorry, Peter. That is revisionist. That is revisionist.
In what sense?
Trump
Please.
never once. This is in the reporting. He never once brought up expanding our military engagement in Greenland with the Danes in private, despite all of the public things that they were saying. It never came up once.
In 2019,
And that-
Carlos
no,
Sands, the
hold on.
ambassador to Denmark,
Hold
did
on a
bring
second.
that up, and it caused us
Trump
massive risk.
his administration never brought it up in conversations with the Danes, okay? And then, on top of that, he could have asked for what he ended up getting. He backed down on his threats because the Danes then said, let's just talk about expanding the base, that you have an existing treaty that allows you to do that. And Trump said, okay, yeah, I'm going to back down on the threats. Why would he do that if he could have just had the conversation in the first place? Trump wants
They had shut
Greenland.
down these conversations
Trump,
in 2019.
Trump wants Greenland because he believed there were critical minerals in there. He claimed falsely that the Chinese and the Russians were already trying to get onto Greenland. That is not true. Okay? There's an Arctic threat, but it's not true that they are there, that they're trying to get into Greenland. So Trump created the Greenland problem. He could have asked the Danes to expand the bases. He didn't. He did not ask them to do it. And then he threatened them. And then when he was forced to back down, he then took the option that was always on the table. That's why on Wall Street they call it the taco trade. Because he is backing down every time. And that's exactly what happened here.
You know why NATO should care about this? It was just a couple of weeks ago that we learned that Iran has ballistic missile capabilities and can reach most of Europe. On top of that, does no one else here find it agitating that we spend billions and trillions of dollars over decades? We have U.S. troops stationed in all these bases with all these allies. And then when we decide that we need to do something that is in our national security interest, you have supposed friends of the United States saying, you can't use these bases, we're not going to permit this, we're not going to help you on that. It is agitating.
Don't they
I don't
have a
think it is
say?
agitating. But bottom line,
But doesn't NATO have a
why
say
doesn't
in how
Europe look at this ballistic missile threat a little more seriously?
How
That's what I
doesn't NATO? Don't you think NATO ought to have a say? European countries ought to have a say in how you address that threat. I'm not disagreeing with you about the threat, but shouldn't they be consulted? Aren't they not right to wonder why weren't they consulted before Trump decided to wage a war? It sounds like you think it's in their defense.
Well, it is.
Shouldn't they have
It
been
is
consulted?
it is in the defense of all of Europe now that we
Shouldn't they have been
see that the
consulted?
ballistic missile threat is
It's not.
real. No one
Should
can
they have
deny
been-
that.
Should they have been consulted?
Consulted. I mean, look, we decided it was in our national security interest.
Oh, okay.
Why they don't understand that it is in theirs is beyond me, and I think that's what leads to the
So
president's
if
hesitation
if
with
it's
the
about our
to
national
realize
security
that
interests, that makes sense, right? But if it's in theirs, they should be consulted. If this war is about Europe's security, shouldn't Europe be consulted?
It's about our goal.
Okay.
Why they don't understand that it is in theirs is beyond me, and I think that's what leads to the
So
president's
if
hesitation with
it's
the
about our,
ballistic missiles can reach most of Europe.
listen,
I thought the missiles were gone. You said this was our national security
It
interest.
is our national security.
Okay, so then why is the onus on Europe to clean up our mess?
The onus is on Europe to defend themselves, and the onus is on the President of the United States to defend the national security
Wait, so
of the United States.
you're not
But we're
asking
all,
Europe to
but
defend
Western
itself.
civilization is in this together, and these fanatics have missiles that can strike most of Europe, and they have
I think
nuclear
this is a
material as well.
disagreement about what alliances are. I mean, if we are really in this together, which is, I think you're right, that's what it's supposed to be. Shouldn't there be mutual trust? Shouldn't there be mutual
And
consultation?
these fanatics have missiles that can strike most of Europe, and they have
I think
nuclear
this is a
material as well.
disagreement about what alliances are. I mean, if we are really
Broken in this by the Trump's attempts to seize Greenland, and now in this current crisis, the Europeans have no faith in the United States anymore. And in the future, if Trump wants support, he should ask for it in advance, not just from the Europeans, but from the American people. He made no attempt to rally the American public. He made no attempt to win congressional support because he thought this would be a short and fast war, and the Iranians would capitulate after he killed the supreme leader. That clearly hasn't happened, and he doesn't know what to do next. So he's kind of floundering around looking for a way out. And in the past, he could just back down in whatever trade war, whatever he has started, and everything would be okay. But in this case, he can't back out of it because the Iranians won't let him. He doesn't, and the Iranians in many ways have the upper hand because they have a chokehold on 20% of the world's oil. It hasn't happened, and he doesn't know what to do next. So he's kind of floundering around looking for a way out. We're not moving any ships to the Strait of Hormuz.
I think both things can be true at the same time. That Iran's goals can be different from the United States, and it can involve keeping us there. for much longer than we'd like to be there. And even while we have tactical control over Iranian territory, they're still
They're winning.
they
Don't worry.
well no I
We have
listen,
control of their entire airspace.
they still
Don't
have
worry,
I
it's
mean
all
Scott, I
going
think you would agree they still have a vote in this to some extent.
Of course.
They are at
Passover in Israel, and tonight there are people inside
bombs raining down
underneath
on
the
on
shopping
Israel
centers
right
in
now.
Israel in tents on the first night of Passover because the bombs are still coming. It's not just
At a much
Israel,
lower rate.
it's the United Arab Emirates, it's Saudi Arabia, it's our U.S. bases in the Middle East have been hit. So we can't say
I
that
agree
this
with you.
war is without a price tag. We
Of
went
course
in,
it is.
the
All war
United
has a
States
price.
and
All war
Israel
has a
went
price.
in, and now the whole world has got to check and will pay the price.
All right, we gotta leave it there, Peter. All right. We'll have much more on the president's speech later in the show. It's 2 hours for us tonight. But next for us, Pam Bondi on